The Conservative Party leadership contest inches forward, and it will be a matter of picking either Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, and it feels like the choice between two particularly rancid sandwiches. Miss Badenoch, with all the tenacity of a cornered badger, warns that the very survival of the Conservative Party rests on choosing the right candidate, by which of course she means herself, and apparently should Mr Jenrick ascend, the Tory party will simply cease to exist. I think the same may be said for Miss Badenoch. A melodramatic claim, perhaps, but in a party that has recently seen more leaders than a particularly unstable game of musical chairs, who's counting? Miss Badenoch isn't just worried about Jenrick, but about Nigel Farage's Reform UK and a resurgent Liberal Democrats. We are having our lunch eaten by everybody, she laments. Well, that's only because it's covered in worms. One could almost hear the violin. She paints herself as Labour's worst nightmare. A Thatcher reboot complete with tough rhetoric and a disdain for anything even remotely associated with stability. This from the woman who warns her party that switching leaders too frequently has damaged the party brand. Quite right, though one might wonder if the party had any brand left to damage except for some sort of advert for a vermiculous weed killer. In an interview with the Daily Telegraph, Badenoch expressed her disdain for Jenrick's pledge to pull Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights, calling it recreating the referendum. Evidently, rehashing past battles isn't the sort of innovation she believes will rescue the party from its own death spiral. But to her credit, Badenoch has at least been consistent in positioning herself as the uncompromising right-wing option, a Thatcher tribute act, and one that, like so many of the tribute acts of Mrs Thatcher in the past, Liz Truss, Theresa May, is based on a misreading of Thatcher. This one insists on her being her own person. She seems to believe that merely by existing she nullifies any Labour attempt to label the Conservatives as prejudiced. If you thought the Tories had enough problems already, enter Mr Jenrick, a shapeshifter whose political convictions bend as the wind bends. Jenrick in turn has tried to paint Badenoch as a dodger, reluctant to face him in head-to-head debates. It seems there's no shortage of mudslinging in this contest, with Badenoch laughing off allegations that she's running scared by suggesting her critics ask her why all the mud is being thrown in one direction. Why indeed, perhaps she's managed to alienate her party more efficiently than her opponent. Meanwhile, Jenrick has been courting the more extreme right wing with the zeal of a man possessed, promising to revive the spirits of Thatcherite relics like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Penny Mordaunt, though even Mordaunt seems hesitant about this peculiar invitation. The whole affair is being sold as a last chance for a party to pull itself back from the brink. But it smacks of desperation, as indeed it should. Jenrick is determined to outflank Badenoch, but one can't help but feel they're racing each other into irrelevance. With both candidates dragging the Tories further rightwards, one wonders if they've any idea who might actually vote for them. The public, according to pollsters, is simply not enthused. A good number of the Conservative Party card holders intend to spoil their ballot papers. As Professor Sir John Curtis notes, neither of these contenders possesses an adequate understanding of why the Tories are losing support, which likely means their efforts to win back Reform UK and Lib Dem defectors will amount to little more than a damp squib. Sorry, under both Badenoch and Jenrick, the Conservative Party is doomed. But that also means the Labour Party is doomed to having no viable opposition, because if you think Victoria Atkins posturing at the dispatch box the other day is opposition, think again. Badenoch insists on a return to traditional Conservative values. We've never really heard what they are. They've never been itemised. Even as Jenrick veers off into a hard-right fantasy of sovereignty and endless Brexit reruns. As the clock ticks down, Conservative members will have to decide which one of these two doomed candidates will lead them, possibly into electoral oblivion. But at least they'll be in the history books. When either Badenoch or Jenrick finally faces off against Labour at the next election, one can only imagine the opposition's relief. After all, what better gift could Labour receive than the spectacle of a Conservative Party eating itself alive?